Have you ever witnessed a rescue that defied every prediction about captive wildlife rehabilitation, where freedom unleashed something beyond human comprehension? Deep in the jungles of Borneo, a conservation hero's desperate mission to save a tortured gorilla from illegal captivity would lead to an outcome so extraordinary that it challenged everything experts believed about animal memory, gratitude, and the unbreakable bonds forged through compassion. What happened next was truly unthinkable. Deep within Malaysian Borneo's Sarawak region, where ancient rainforests stretch endlessly toward mist-shrouded mountains, lies one of Southeast Asia's last untouched wilderness frontiers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. This UNESCO-protected ecosystem encompasses thousands of square kilometers of pristine jungle, where towering dipterocarp trees create living cathedrals beneath canopies so dense that sunlight penetrates in scattered emerald beams. The forest floor pulses with life, carpeted in decomposing leaves that release the rich, earthy scent of centuries-old growth cycles, feeding this incredible biodiversity hotspot. Crystal-clear rivers wind through valleys wrapped in perpetual humidity, their gentle flow mixing with the haunting calls of hornbills and the distant crashes of orangutans navigating the highest branches. Massive buttress roots create natural fortresses where countless species find sanctuary, while exotic orchids bloom in impossible colors along branches that have supported life for millennia. But Sarawak also harbors darker secrets that challenge our faith in humanity's relationship with nature. Hidden within this paradise are illegal operations that exploit the forest's most vulnerable inhabitants, clandestine facilities where endangered species suffer in conditions that mock every principle of conservation and compassion. What was about to unfold in this pristine wilderness would prove that sometimes the most profound acts of liberation lead to outcomes that transcend every expectation about animal consciousness and emotional memory. This was a story that would challenge fundamental assumptions about the bonds possible between human and primate, demonstrating that freedom given with genuine love can create connections that defy scientific explanation. The extraordinary events that were about to transform both rescuer and rescued would prove that in nature's most challenging moments, when cruelty seems to have triumphed over compassion, heroes emerge with the courage to risk everything for justice. But what happened after liberation? The unthinkable response that would leave wildlife experts speechless would reveal depths of animal gratitude and intelligence that science was only beginning to understand. This is where our story begins, in a place where courage meets cruelty, and where one man's determination to right a terrible wrong would unleash something beautiful beyond imagination. In the heart of Sarawak's conservation frontlines worked Dr. James Lim, a Malaysian wildlife veterinarian whose 15-year crusade against illegal animal trafficking had earned him both legendary status among conservationists and dangerous enemies within criminal networks. Standing just under 6 feet with weathered hands that bore countless scars from treating traumatized animals, his gentle brown eyes reflected the accumulated wisdom of someone who had witnessed both humanity's worst cruelties and its most profound compassion. Dr. Lim's mobile clinic operated from a converted Land Rover that served as both rescue vehicle and emergency treatment facility, equipped with specialized medical equipment designed for treating everything from injured orangutans to poisoned sun bears. His reputation for successfully rehabilitating animals that other experts had written off as beyond saving had made him the go-to rescuer for the region's most desperate cases. But it was his unique approach to animal psychology that truly set him apart. Unlike many veterinarians who focus solely on physical healing, Dr. Lim understood that traumatized wildlife required emotional rehabilitation as complex as any medical treatment. His patient, gentle demeanor had earned the trust of countless rescued animals who had learned to fear human contact. Deep in the illegal facility that Dr. Lim was about to discover lived Bayu, a 12-year-old male Bornean orangutan whose name meant wind in Malay, a bitter irony for a creature who hadn't felt natural breeze on his face in over 8 years. Captured as an infant when poachers killed his mother, Bayu had spent his formative years in a cramped concrete cell barely large enough for him to stand upright. The magnificent ape's russet fur had lost its natural luster from years of poor nutrition and stress, while his intelligent dark eyes reflected a depth of sadness that spoke of dreams crushed and freedoms stolen. Yet beneath the trauma and resignation, something indomitable remained, a spark of the wild intelligence that made orangutans among the most cognitively advanced creatures on Earth. This remarkable resilience, hidden beneath years of suffering, would prove crucial to the extraordinary bond about to form between rescuer and rescued, a connection that would challenge every assumption about the emotional lives of our closest evolutionary relatives. That humid Thursday morning dawned peacefully over Sarawak's rainforest canopy, with golden sunlight filtering through layers of emerald foliage as Dr. Lim conducted his weekly rounds through the legal wildlife rehabilitation centers scattered throughout the region. His mobile clinic hummed quietly along dirt roads carved through ancient jungle, the familiar sounds of forest awakening creating a symphony that had become the soundtrack to his conservation mission. The veterinarian had settled into his routine patrol with the methodical precision of someone whose work had become both profession and calling. His weathered hands guided the steering wheel with practiced ease while his trained eyes scanned the forest edges for any signs of illegal activity or animals in distress. These morning surveys had become sacred ritual, moments of calm preparation before facing whatever wildlife emergencies the day might bring. In his cramped concrete prison 3 kilometers deeper into the jungle, Bayu had awakened to another day of captivity with the resigned patience that defined his existence. The magnificent orangutan sat motionless in his inadequate cell, his intelligent eyes fixed on the single shaft of sunlight that penetrated through a crack in the corrugated metal roof above him. The illegal facility operated with the deliberate isolation that characterizes criminal enterprises, hidden behind legitimate palm oil plantation boundaries and accessible only through unmarked jungle paths that discouraged casual discovery. Its concrete buildings blended into the forest landscape through careful camouflage, while the constant humidity muffled any sounds that might attract unwanted attention. For Bayu, this morning routine represented 8 years of identical days, awakening to the same gray walls, the same inadequate meal of rotting fruit scraps, the same crushing loneliness that came from total isolation from his own kind. His powerful arms, designed for swinging through forest canopies, remained cramped in unnatural positions within the cell's confining walls. Neither Dr. Lim nor Bayu could know that this peaceful morning routine was about to be shattered by a chance discovery that would change both their lives forever. The convergence of dedicated conservationist and desperate captive was approaching with the inevitability of fate, setting the stage for a rescue that would challenge every assumption about the bonds possible between species. Dr. Lim's peaceful morning survey was suddenly interrupted by an anomaly that made his conservationist instincts flare with alarm. Fresh tire tracks cutting through pristine jungle, where no legitimate vehicle should have been traveling. The muddy impressions led away from the main forest road toward an area marked on his maps as undeveloped wilderness, raising immediate red flags about potential illegal activity. Following these suspicious tracks with the careful precision of someone who had learned to read the forest's warning signs, Dr. Lim guided his mobile clinic deeper into increasingly dense vegetation. The tracks were recent, probably made within the last 24 hours, and they led toward a section of jungle that showed subtle signs of human interference, cleared undergrowth that tried to appear natural but couldn't fool his trained eye. As he navigated carefully through the camouflaged pathway, disturbing sounds began filtering through the humid air that made his blood run cold. These weren't the natural calls of wild orangutans or other native species, but something else entirely, the desperate vocalizations of creatures in distress, muffled by distance and what sounded like concrete barriers. The sounds carried emotional weight that transcended species barriers, calls that spoke of isolation, desperation, and psychological suffering that no wild animal should ever experience. Dr. Lim's 15 years of wildlife rescue had taught him to distinguish between normal territorial vocalizations and genuine distress signals, and what he was hearing fell squarely into the latter category. Following the sounds with growing horror and determination, he began to make out the outline of crude concrete structures, partially concealed beneath corrugated metal roofing and camouflage netting. The illegal facility had been designed to blend into the forest landscape, but the desperate cries of its imprisoned inhabitants betrayed its location to anyone with the knowledge and courage to investigate. As Dr. Lim parked his vehicle behind a screen of dense vegetation and approached on foot, the full scope of the criminal operation began to reveal itself. This wasn't a small-scale poaching outfit. It was a sophisticated illegal zoo designed to hold multiple endangered species for black market trafficking. The sounds of suffering that had drawn him here were growing stronger with each step, and his heart raced with the realization that he was about to confront one of the illegal wildlife operations he had been fighting against his entire career. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As Dr. Lim crept closer to the illegal facility, the scene that greeted him was every conservationist's worst nightmare. Through gaps in the camouflage netting, he could see a series of concrete cells that violated every principle of animal welfare and species dignity. The structures were deliberately cramped, designed to minimize construction costs rather than provide adequate living space for their imprisoned inhabitants. In the central cell, the source of the desperate vocalizations that had drawn him here, sat Bayu, a magnificent male orangutan whose powerful frame was grotesquely confined within concrete walls barely large enough for him to stand upright. The cell measured no more than 8 feet by 6 feet, forcing the intelligent primate to remain in permanent semi-crouch positions that must have caused chronic pain and muscle deterioration. The orangutan's once lustrous russet fur had become matted and dull from years of inadequate nutrition and psychological stress. His intelligent dark eyes, which should have been scanning forest canopies for fruit and social interactions, instead stared with the hollow resignation of a creature whose spirit had been systematically broken through prolonged captivity. What made the scene even more heartbreaking was the evidence of Bayu's attempts to maintain dignity within impossible circumstances. Despite his cramped quarters, he had arranged the few scraps of vegetation thrown into his cell with careful precision, creating small patterns that spoke of an intelligent mind desperately trying to impose order on chaos. The cell itself was a monument to cruelty: concrete floors stained with years of waste, rusted metal bars that showed signs of desperate escape attempts, and a corrugated metal roof that trapped humid air and created stifling conditions during Borneo's hottest months. A single water container, green with algae, provided the only hydration source. Around Bayu's prison, Dr. Lim could see additional cells containing other endangered species, sun bears, clouded leopards, and exotic birds, all suffering similar conditions of systematic neglect and psychological torture. The entire facility represented a criminal enterprise built on the exploitation of Southeast Asia's most vulnerable wildlife. Most devastating was the isolation. These highly social creatures had been deliberately separated from their own kind, creating psychological trauma that went far beyond physical deprivation. For Bayu, 8 years of solitary confinement had inflicted wounds that might never fully heal. The sight before him triggered something profound within Dr. Lim's consciousness, an emotional response that transcended his professional training and reached directly into the core of his humanity. Bayu's hollow eyes seemed to look right through him, reflecting 8 years of abandoned hope and systematic cruelty that challenged every principle Dr. Lim had dedicated his life to defending. Standing in the humid shadows of the illegal facility, the veterinarian found himself facing an impossible tactical situation that went far beyond medical intervention. This wasn't a simple rescue of injured wildlife. This was a complex criminal operation protected by dangerous people who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate threats to their lucrative business. The facility's remote location and sophisticated camouflage indicated significant financial backing and professional criminal organization. Dr. Lim's tactical mind raced through the brutal mathematics of intervention. A single conservationist against an unknown number of armed traffickers represented suicide odds, especially in terrain that favored those familiar with the facility's layout and escape routes. His mobile clinic contained medical equipment, not weapons, and his communication devices might not penetrate the dense jungle canopy effectively enough to summon immediate backup. Yet something deeper than logic was driving his response. Bayu's desperate condition spoke to protective instincts that had nothing to do with professional obligations and everything to do with basic human decency. The orangutan's obvious intelligence made his suffering even more heartbreaking. This wasn't just physical captivity, but psychological torture of a creature whose cognitive abilities approached human levels. The most devastating aspect of the situation was the systematic nature of the cruelty. This wasn't accidental neglect or ignorant mismanagement. It was deliberate exploitation designed to maximize profit while minimizing costs, treating sentient beings as mere commodities in an illegal marketplace that thrived on suffering. Dr. Lim found himself crossing a psychological boundary that separated professional wildlife rescue from personal moral crusade. The sight of Bayou's resignation and the evidence of years of systematic abuse was triggering responses he couldn't ignore, even if intervention meant risking everything he had built in 15 years of conservation work. Every minute of hesitation meant continued suffering for creatures who had already endured far more than any living being should have to bear, and Dr. Lim realized he had reached the moment where he would either act or become complicit through inaction. Rather than becoming the passive witness Dr. Lim initially appeared to be, he transformed into the active catalyst that would change everything. His 15 years of wildlife rescue experience had taught him that sometimes the greatest acts of conservation required abandoning conventional protocols in favor of immediate moral action, regardless of personal risk. Working with practiced efficiency born of countless emergency rescues, Dr. Lim quickly assessed the facility's security measures and operational patterns. The absence of guards during daylight hours suggested the traffickers operated primarily at night, using the cover of darkness to move animals and conduct business away from potential wildlife authority patrols. His veterinary training proved invaluable as he approached Bayou's cell with the calm, gentle demeanor that had earned the trust of countless traumatized animals throughout his career. The magnificent orangutan's initial reaction was predictable. 8 years of human cruelty had taught him to fear any bipedal approach, and he pressed himself against the far wall of his cramped prison. But Dr. Lim possessed something the traffickers had never shown: infinite patience and genuine compassion. Speaking in soft, reassuring tones while maintaining non-threatening body language, he began the delicate process of earning trust from a creature who had every reason to view humans as sources of pain and disappointment. The breakthrough moment came when Dr. Lim extended his hand through the rusted bars, not demanding contact but simply offering the possibility of gentle interaction. For several minutes, Bayou studied this unusual human behavior with the analytical intelligence that made orangutans among the most cognitively advanced primates on Earth. Then, in a gesture that would haunt Dr. Lim for the rest of his life, the traumatized orangutan slowly extended one long, powerful finger to make the briefest contact with the veterinarian's outstretched hand. It was the first voluntary interaction Bayou had experienced with a human being in 8 years of captivity. Using specialized tools from his mobile clinic, Dr. Lim began the painstaking process of dismantling the cell's locking mechanisms while maintaining constant, reassuring contact with Bayou. The orangutan seemed to understand that liberation was approaching, his intelligent eyes reflecting the first spark of hope they had shown in years. The moment Dr. Lim successfully dismantled the cell's locking mechanism, what followed defied every protocol in wildlife rescue manuals. Instead of the cautious, gradual rehabilitation process typically required for traumatized captive animals, Bayou demonstrated remarkable trust by immediately moving toward his liberator with deliberate intention rather than fearful hesitation. The magnificent orangutan's first steps outside his concrete prison were tentative but purposeful, his powerful limbs trembling with a combination of physical weakness from years of confinement and emotional overwhelm at experiencing freedom after 8 years of captivity. Dr. Lim remained perfectly still, allowing Bayou to set the pace in terms of their interaction while prepared to intervene if the traumatized primate showed signs of panic or aggression. What happened next challenged every assumption about the rehabilitation timeline for severely traumatized wildlife. Rather than fleeing immediately into the jungle as expected, Bayou turned toward Dr. Lim with unmistakable recognition and what could only be described as gratitude. The intelligent ape's dark eyes locked onto his rescuer's face with an intensity that spoke of profound understanding about what had just transpired. Dr. Lim quickly contacted the Sarawak Wildlife Authority using his satellite communication equipment, reporting the location of the illegal facility and requesting immediate backup to secure the site and rescue the remaining captive animals. His voice carried the urgency of someone who knew that criminal organizations typically responded swiftly to security breaches. The response was immediate and professional. Within 30 minutes, a helicopter rescue team was airborne and heading toward their coordinates, equipped with specialized equipment for managing large-scale wildlife recovery operations and law enforcement support to secure the criminal site. But as Dr. Lim prepared to guide Bayou toward the extraction point where the rescue helicopter would land, the orangutan did something that would challenge every scientific understanding of primate behavior and emotional intelligence. Instead of moving toward the freedom of the jungle canopy that should have been his primary instinct, Bayu deliberately positioned himself near Dr. Lim and began exhibiting protective behaviors typically reserved for family group members. The traumatized orangutan seemed to have formed an immediate, profound bond with his rescuer that transcended typical animal-human relationships, setting the stage for behavioral patterns that would astonish wildlife experts. What unfolded as the rescue helicopter approached would be remembered as one of the most extraordinary displays of interspecies bonding ever documented. As the aircraft's rotor wash began disturbing the jungle canopy, Bayu's reaction defied every prediction about traumatized wildlife behavior in high-stress situations. Instead of fleeing from the mechanical noise that should have triggered fear responses, the magnificent orangutan positioned himself protectively between Dr. Lim and the approaching helicopter, displaying behaviors typically reserved for defending family members from perceived threats. His powerful arms spread wide in a gesture that unmistakably communicated protective intent rather than territorial aggression. When the rescue team landed and began approaching with standard wildlife capture equipment, Bayu's response shocked everyone present. The traumatized ape refused to be separated from Dr. Lim, gently but firmly grasping the veterinarian's arm, while maintaining eye contact that spoke of profound trust and attachment. The wildlife specialists had prepared for typical captive animal reactions, panic, aggression, or complete withdrawal, but nothing in their training had prepared them for an orangutan displaying such sophisticated emotional intelligence and selective bonding. Bayu seemed to understand exactly who had freed him and was determined not to lose contact with his liberator. Dr. Lim found himself in an unprecedented situation where standard rescue protocols had to be abandoned in favor of accommodating the extraordinary bond that had formed between rescuer and rescued. The helicopter team quickly adapted their approach, allowing Bayu to remain close to Dr. Lim during the extraction process. As they lifted off from the illegal facility, with law enforcement securing the site and other rescued animals, Bayu's behavior continued to astonish everyone aboard. The orangutan remained calm and focused entirely on Dr. Lim, displaying attachment behaviors that would redefine scientific understanding of primate emotional complexity. What happened in the months following Bayu's rescue was truly unthinkable, and redefined everything scientists believed about primate rehabilitation. Unlike typical rescued orangutans who required extensive isolation and gradual reintroduction to natural behaviors, Bayu thrived in Dr. Lim's presence while simultaneously rediscovering his wild instincts. The extraordinary bond persisted through the entire rehabilitation process. Bayu would only eat, sleep, or participate in physical therapy when Dr. Lim was nearby, yet showed remarkable progress in relearning natural orangutan behaviors. Wildlife experts were astounded to witness an animal displaying such sophisticated emotional intelligence while successfully recovering from severe trauma. Most remarkably, when the time came for Bayu's release into protected forest sanctuary, the orangutan made an unprecedented choice. Instead of immediately disappearing into the canopy as expected, he established a territory within sight of Dr. Lim's research station, creating the first documented case of a fully wild orangutan voluntarily maintaining proximity to human habitation. Today, 5 years later, Bayu continues to thrive in his chosen territory while regularly visiting Dr. Lim at the forest's edge. Their relationship has become a living laboratory for studying primate emotional complexity and interspecies bonding. Dr. Lim's documentation of Bayu's behavior sparked international research into animal gratitude and attachment, challenging fundamental assumptions about wildlife rehabilitation. Their story proved that rescue isn't just about physical liberation. It's about recognizing the profound emotional lives of creatures whose capacity for love and loyalty rivals our own. In Borneo's ancient forests, where freedom and friendship transcended species boundaries, the unthinkable became beautiful reality. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.